Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, we have Owen Beck details. We have Lane Hutson details. We're going to talk about Filip Mesar this time since my Wi-Fi will not drop out on me. We're going to talk about everybody else from the draft, including my thoughts on Miguel Tourigny. And if I mispronounce that, I will get better. And we're going to talk about what's next for the Montreal Canadiens ahead of free agency. All that and more inside today's show.
Your Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 654 of Locked On Canadiens. We are your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, and today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered for every season, more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Metla. I am home in New York State in Buffalo, and I'm joined, as always, by the very tired, the active stick, Laura Saba. Laura, it has been quite the weekend in Montreal, the hockey capital of the world. Sorry, Toronto, deal with it. How are we feeling 2-3 days removed from the NHL draft at this point?
It's been a fantastic week, and I just want to shout out some people who have come up to us and said hi. I want to shout out the Steve Dangle crew, the SDPN crew, because we crashed their party. Essentially, we went over to hang out with them. And a lot of people who were there for the event came over to talk to us and recognize us from the show. So to everybody who was amazing to us, we are so grateful to you. It brings us so much joy to bring you this show every single day, 5 days a week. And to hear that you listen to it, you know who we are, you appreciate us. It honestly, at some point I started tearing up. That's how much I appreciated it. For people who are new to this show, whether you're listening on the podcast or whether you are new to the YouTube, we do not tolerate people abusing other people in our comments, so we will be deleting that mercilessly. I saw people arguing with each other. You're welcome to debate, but every time I try to keep on top of this. If I see anybody being abusive or even just a jerk to anybody else in our comments, whether it's myself or Scott, or more commonly to other people in our comments, I will be deleting that. That is a hard and fast rule. You will not be allowed to comment on our YouTube ever again, because you have to respect each other. Please disagree. We love watching these debates, and sometimes we get some ideas for content from, the stuff that you guys are talking about. We love hearing from you. We just don't love when people are calling other people. And if you see anything, please feel free to bring it to our attention. You can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. I try to go through the comments a couple of times a day. Sometimes a reply won't be visible. If somebody is being abusive to you or anyone else, please reach out. They will be blocked from commenting on our channel. This is, you don't have to agree with us or anyone else. You do have to be nice. And for those of you who are seeing a woman talking and it's bothering you, I've been getting paid for my hockey opinions for 10 years. I'm here. I'm staying here. This is not the show for you if this bothers you.
I was going to say, if Laura, being one of the smartest hockey people I know, bugs you, then it's your own fault. And quite frankly, no one's going to put up with that. You will not win by being a bad person to my co-host or any other woman, person of color, person in the LGBTQ community talking about hockey because that feels different to you. That's your problem. Go figure yourself out. Yeah, exactly. Go figure yourself out. That is our spiel on that. Don't be a dick, please. We love to. I know that we're supposed to be a family show, but don't be a dick. We love debates in the comments. Debates are what makes hockey podcasting fun. Laura and I don't always agree. We don't agree with our guests sometimes. We don't agree with some of our other hosts on the network. You know what we do, though? We can keep it respectful. If you are an adult on the internet, you should be able to do that. If you are a child on the internet, please learn to do that. It will serve you better in life. However, we're going to shift away from comment section etiquette, which, like I said, Laura said, follow it or pay the cost. Simple as that.
But I do want to say very much though that we appreciated everybody who spoke to us and even the people that we didn't get to see. There were so many. Beth from the Happy Hour we missed, Randy Hansen we missed, two of our favorite people on this podcast, and we missed them. So hopefully there will be another time. But in the meantime, just thank you so much, and let's talk about Filip Mesar because we didn't get to do that because of the Wi-Fi last week.
Yes, so we're gonna put three people in one segment here, and maybe I'll shift one of them to the next segment if we need to, time allowing here. But Filip Mesar, and if you haven't seen the video of Juraj Slafkovsky discovering that Filip Mesar was not only drafted, but was drafted to the same team that he plays on now, and his reaction, you need to watch it. It's one of my favorite clips from this weekend, next to Bruce Boudreau meeting Kevin Owens for the first time in the middle of the draft, which also you should go watch. It's awesome. I love this. I wrote Filip Mesar's draft profile. This kid has so much talent and skill that if he can figure out the flaws in his game, there's so much potential. He wants to come over to North America. We know Juraj Slafkovsky will very likely be playing somewhere in North America, whether it's with the Habs or with the Rocket. He can do both. Filip Mesar can do both as a first-round pick as well. I think they may see if he wants to go to, I believe, an OHL team owns his rights, but we talked about this a little bit on our Shoulder Friday episode, but they went high risk, and they did it with Lane Hutson too. All the upside in the world. Yes, he's small, but so much potential upside. I love these two picks because it's such a departure from the previous era that the Canadiens went, we're going to take a chance. If it doesn't work out, that's okay, but they took a chance. And I'd rather them try and fail than not try at all on this. I love the idea of Filip Mesar. I'm very excited to see him at camp. I'm excited to see Lane Hutson, who had an endocrinologist note at the combine saying that he will grow because he has I believe it was a hormonal imbalance, that his bones don't grow at the same pace that he ages. And I think that's amazing. The man brought science to make people draft him, and it worked, honestly.
I have wanted him on this team since I heard about that, since I heard that happened. That is such amazing energy. It is king-ish. It is, honestly, I love that. But let's go back to Filip Mesar for a second. Because of the, being in the city and spending time with lots of people, there were a lot of people, whether they were in the scouting prospect community or even working for other organizations, that said that this was a good pick. People talk about how after every draft, there's always the conversation amongst media, journalists, even other teams, who won the draft. I don't think that this is a conversation that is helpful to anybody. I do think, though, that the Canadiens got a really high draft grade. People ranked them well. They seem to be draft winners. And by and large, anybody who talked about Filip Mesar, yes, there are flaws in his game, but just imagine that he figures them out. The upside here, the potential here is so high that other people who cover other teams, people who work for other teams, people with expertise, say that if this pans out, it's going to be phenomenal. I'm not saying he's going to be the next superstar, but I'm saying he's going to be a very key piece on a good team, the good team that we're hoping to see in a couple of years from now.
And that's the thing, is it's like, if it works out, which the good part is the Canadiens are investing heavily in player development now. Like Filip Mesar is going to work with Marie-Philippe Poulin. He's going to be able to be taught by Martin St. Louis at the prospects camp and everything. Adam Nicholas is part of this here. They have a sports science program that's so well renowned. They have top-notch facilities, not only at the Bell Center, but in Brossard and in Laval, if that's where they end up. There's so much here to like. And Lane Hutson, yes, he's small. He's the smallest, defenseman ever taken. Byron Bader talked about this, but his star potential, if he develops the way that he can be, puts him on pace to be an absolute stud in the NHL. There's so much talent there, and it's exciting. And we haven't even talked about Owen Beck, who I'm going to shove into our next segment here, because I love Owen Beck, someone I've talked about a lot on this podcast if they weren't picking Shane Wright. And I like being right. We'll get to that on another day. I'm excited. There's so much still to talk about in the draft. We're going to get into all of that coming up next. But our next partner has a product that I take every single morning because it helps me achieve what I want every single day. I am talking about Athletic Greens. and they've got 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens that'll help you start your day right too. It'll help your gut health, help your immune system, your nervous system, energy, recovery, focus. All of these things you can get through Athletic Greens. And everyone takes a multivitamin. At least they should be. And it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. And Athletic Greens is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's the one thing you can do every single day and take care of yourself. And your subscription to Athletic Greens comes with a year's supply of vitamin D, which is so important to add when winter rolls around and it gets kind of dark outside and you don't get much sunlight. And they've got over 7,000 five-star reviews, recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with a convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water. That's it. No need for a million pills or supplements. And to make it easier on you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. We are back. We are Locked On Canadiens. We are tired. It has been a very long weekend. I've eaten so much Montreal food staples. We have brought back a dozen bagels from St. Viateur. I will not hear slander about them. They are delicious. I have finally had Montreal bagels.
Team Fairmount.
This podcast is over. I am looking for a new co-host, or my co-host is looking for a new co-host as well. This is our civil war. That is our off-season content. We're just going to debate bagels. I hope you're all ready for that. We do have to get back. We still have several more draft picks because the Canadiens only traded, a couple of picks in the Kirby Dach trade. But the point being, I want to talk about Owen Beck before we get into some of these other picks here. I love this. Starting off day 2 by picking Owen Beck put me in a great mood for the rest of the weekend. I was a little apprehensive after leaving Thursday night. Juraj Slafkovsky, Filip Mesar, high upside. Kirby Dach, potentially high upside. But I felt uneasy about the overall plan. They hadn't hit a thing that I go, that's a surefire bet. Then they started their day with Owen Beck. Owen Beck is very well regarded. If you have a chance, read Elite Prospects scouting report of him. Lauren Kelly, who I've been on Game Over Montreal with, she's one of the best hockey minds out there in terms of scouting OHL players. And just in general, she's phenomenal. Has nothing but glowing praise for him. He skates well. He's defensively responsible. Could work on his playmaking, but he does all the little things right. And it almost reminds me of an Arturi Lehkonen light, but in the middle of the ice. He has all the tools to be just so versatile. Move him up, move him down, put him here, put him there, put him on the penalty kill, put him on the power play, put him 5-on-5. Owen Beck has all those tools to be a surefire NHL bet. Even if the ceiling isn't super high, like a Mesar or Slafkovsky, there's still talent there. And I think this was a great way to start day 2. You took 2 big swings. Now you bunted for a single. And then they took Lane Hutson with the next pick and started swinging for the fences again. I love the draft strategy idea. And I love the idea of Owen Beck as a Canadiens prospect.
I do too. I know we were supposed to be done talking about Lane Hutson, but I think it symbolizes something which we talk a lot about on this podcast. It's a buzzword that I like ever since it started in Major League Baseball, like exploiting market inefficiencies, right? One of the market inefficiencies, and I don't want to get yelled at for this. You might disagree, and that's fair. But I don't think I'm wrong because there's actual data to prove it, is that short players very often, they are in an extremely unexploited market inefficiency amongst NHL teams. And if a guy's only knock is that he doesn't have the size, it's true, you can't teach size, you can't add size. But when you're moving into an NHL that is not the same NHL as 5, 10, 15 years ago, you are moving into a speed and skill league and you're getting closer and closer. Like, you can't turn around and say Tampa keeps finding these short players that are talented It's because Tampa keeps picking the short players that are talented that nobody else is picking, right? That's what's happening. If you add skill to your lineup, they do have size as well. I mean, you literally could look at their number 1 overall draft pick. It's not like they are running away from size. They traded for Kirby Dach. They want some size up the middle, right? Like Nick Suzuki isn't a gigantic guy. So when you're doing something like that, when you're swinging for the fences, you're taking some risks. You had so many picks in this draft. You were able to get away with trading several picks and still keeping, you had twice as many, I think, almost as the New York Rangers did, for example. You have to take some risks. I do like, though, Owen Beck, because we talked a lot about having a higher floor, lower ceiling. Those are the players that you're like, all right, this guy is going to be an NHLer, right? Barring some crazy freak thing. Like if the Canadiens, and the other thing about taking all of these risks that they're doing is that they are putting their money where their mouth is. How many times have you heard, since Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes later took over, how many times have you heard the word development coming out of their mouths when they get asked about the plan, the future, their strategy, everything? They use the word development. This is a chance for them to say, we're taking this raw skill and we're going to do everything in our power. We have the financial wherewithal, we have the actual capital, the social capital as a team, to put a lot into development. This is their chance to prove that they're going to do everything they possibly can to get the best out of these players that they pick. Some of them will not pan out, but at least we will know it's not because the team messed their development up.
And the thing is, the rest of their draft wasn't overly risky. I would say it actually seemed kind of safe, maybe a little safer than I would have liked on some of the picks. They went a lot for overage guys, Jared Davidson, Petri Nurmi, Miguel Tourigny, who I will talk about in a second. But their middle 2 picks there, Cedrick Guindon and Vinzenz Rohrer, and if I mispronounce those, I will learn how to pronounce them in very short order here. I was sitting next to Hattie, who does the North American scouting or prospects for Eyes on the Prize and works for Dauber Prospects. And there's something there. There's a work ethic in these players and things that the Canadiens saw. They went after a lot of guys who think the game well, even if the stats aren't always there, in that they know what they're doing with the puck and they're learning and adapting like a sponge. And I love that. I really, really like that about these guys here, is that, yeah, they're not the highest ceiling picks. They're not, guaranteed bets, but they have all the things coaches love. They're relentless. They try hard every single shift and try to make things happen. And I want to talk about Miguel Tourigny a little bit because he is an overage player, draft -2 at this, or +2 at this point. He's 20 years old. He's a 5'8" defenseman who plays for Acadie Bathurst in the QMJHL this past year. So he's teammates with Riley Kidney. And before that, he played for Blainville-Boisbriand, the Armada, and was traded this year. He put up 81 points as a defenseman. And I think it was Nick Bobrov or Martin Lapointe who says, when I was watching him, I thought he was a forward at first because he loves to get into the play. And we talk about all these 7th-round picks. Xavier Simoneau just signed an AHL contract. Obviously, Raphael Harvey-Pinard has his NHL contract. Caden Primo has an entry-level contract. It is, the goalie of the future. And Jake Evans has been a regular NHLer for 3 seasons now? He was a 7th-round pick, almost one of the last picks in the draft. And I'm wondering if they just went, you know what, overager, they did with Harvey Pinard. They did it with Xavier Simoneau. I really hope they're doing it with him because he's eligible for an AHL contract. And if they're going younger in Laval, or even if he goes to the ECHL with the Lions right now, I love it. It's your last pick of the draft. Who cares if he's small? He put up 81 points as a defenseman. Go for it, right? That's what the draft thought should be. It's the last round. No one's going to roast you because you didn't draft this dude and you drafted this guy. It's your 200 picks in. Everyone wants to go home at that point.
100%. I absolutely agree. And I think, we've got so much to talk about that we are going to have to move some of the discussion that we wanted to do today for next episode. For example, people want us to talk about Shane Wright. People want us to talk a little bit more about Kirby Dach, the loss of Alexander Romanov, and also obviously the first overall pick and all of that. We will go a little bit more in depth into some of the storylines tomorrow. But I think for now, we just wanted to kind of do a quick recap. And I think the overager thing is really fun because the Canadiens have had a lot of success with not just overagers, but also undrafteds, right? Like, if you put in the right work and the player is, like, there was talent there that maybe it wasn't being brought out for whatever reason, and you put some work and you work with the player or something like that, like, sometimes you get a great gem out of it. I mean, Martin St. Louis himself was never drafted, and he's one of the greatest players to ever play the game. So I think, it's not just about where you get picked or if you get picked at all. It's also about what resources are put into you and how you respond to that.
Yeah, and obviously we will get into Wright, Slafkovsky, losing Romanov, everything else in tomorrow's episode. Obviously, we have a ton to cover. That includes the rumors going around, obviously sitting in the press row. You hear and see a lot, and a lot comes across Twitter, and we're going to dive into all of those coming up next. But first, like we said earlier, today's show is brought to you by BetOnline, and they are your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can get breaking developments, league reviews, news. Obviously, the NHL playoffs are over. Free agency's right around the corner. They got betting lines for that. Major League Baseball's in full swing, no pun intended. They've got everything you need there, and you get live wagering information, esports, and scores all at betonline.net. And you can also bet MMA, boxing, golf. It is all there. So head to their website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. Bet online, where the game starts. We are back with Locked On Canadiens, and we've got to kind of do the speculation roundup, we'll call it. A lot over the weekend, a lot coming from Kevin Weeks, and not a lot of it really came to much of anything, at least in terms of things for the Canadiens. But there were two names that he mentioned around the draft, is that Kent Hughes received a tremendous amount of calls on Josh Anderson, and that with all the goalies moving around, we are still waiting on a potential Matt Murray to Toronto trade that was coming around when I left Montreal 7 hours ago and is around here somewhere. We don't know when it's going to happen, but Jake Allen's name was around with Washington, I believe New Jersey, Edmonton, and Toronto, all considered in the mix for it. And my biggest thought with this, the Anderson trade rumors aside, which I don't think there's anything there currently, I don't see them trading Jake Allen. I don't think they can trade Jake Allen right now. Not because teams don't want him. I'm sure every team, not every team, but a good chunk of the teams looking for a goalie would love Jake Allen. The Canadiens can't bank an entire season on Carey Price's knee being 100% when they don't know yet. And they're not going to trade away Jake Allen yet. And I get it makes sense, but it ignores the context of the Canadiens then don't have an NHL goalie they're 100% sure in if you trade Jake Allen at this moment.
Right. And so I think one of the things that we have to remember is with the Josh Anderson thing, the Canadiens have always made it clear that they're listening. They're listening, right? They like him, but they want to get a lot for him, which is fair. Now, Josh Anderson for me is the kind of player where other GMs have FOMO over him. It's not what he brings to the team. It's what you think you're missing out if you don't get him. I think that's why Marc Bergevin paid him a lot of money. I think that's why he was traded for in this market. And anybody who's listened to this podcast for even 1 second or follows me on Twitter knows that I love watching Josh Anderson play hockey. It brings me joy. He is phenomenal and fun to watch. He's a gigantic force. But the fact that Kent Hughes keeps bringing up that teams call him, and he said, I didn't know how much interest there was actually going to be. Like, I didn't expect it to be this, frenzy, this interest in Josh Anderson.
Sure, Ken. Come on.
Partly,
have you seen it?
He's driving up the price, right?
Yes.
But also, I would buy Josh Anderson if he was available. I think like Kent Hughes is playing this really, really well because GMs will overpay for him, and he's waiting for the one who will. Right? He's probably getting decent value right now, but he's waiting to see if somebody will overpay for Josh Anderson. I think that's fair. With Jake Allen, I think the team loves him. They love him. I love him. You love him. He does what he needs to do. He was brought in to be a serviceable backup. He was overplayed last year, but he came in and he had a lot of bad luck with injuries, but he came in and he knows whose net it is. He knows he's there to support Carey Price. He understands his role on the team, and he's a player that can win games for you. You just need him to be decent, and that's what he is. And this team has had a history of not good backups. And I know the Canadiens don't know what their goaltending picture looks like, and as long as it's indefinite or unclear, I personally think that they would keep Jake Allen around, maybe flip him at the deadline. It's towards the end of his contract. They might. flip him at the deadline. But I think for me right now, without knowing how well Carey Price can play and how much he can play, it is too much of a gamble to let Jake Allen go unless you know that you're going to be able to get a goalie. Maybe on free agency day they do, and then they get to trade him. But I don't think that that's going to happen until they know somebody is going to be able to be in net that they can rely on at least a little bit next year.
And I also look at it this way, is that there's a name that we know is out there. Like, it was basically confirmed by Kent Hughes when we talked about it last week. No one is talking about Jeff Petrie. We hear names that we think aren't going to be out there, which tells me when the names we don't hear are the ones that are actually likely moving here. We've talked about Christian Dvorak. We have talked about, Jeff Petrie before. We've talked about, a Mike Hoffman or whomever. And I have to wonder, there's all this bluster around Anderson and this, and we go, well, they asked too much. Maybe they can still get good value if they go, well, if your asking price is too much for this, we have this here. And they go, well, we'll offer you this, and it's a better package than they might have before. I do think by tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if Kent Hughes is taking today to kind of go, I'm going to have a glass of wine, I'm going to have a steak, and I'm going to go to bed early because it has been a very long weekend. And then Monday, he just comes out and just goes, pew, pew, trade, right into free agency because the Habs need cap space. Kirby Dach needs a contract. Other players on this team that they need to re-sign need deals. And Nick Suzuki's new contract kicks in too. Like, yes, Shea Weber's contract is off the books. You still have Carey Price. You still have Jonathan Drouin. You still have expensive pieces here. You got to move around some cap space to make it work. And I think they will. And I think we're going to see a lot of movement here going into the trade deadline. And even a couple hours into the trade deadline, if big names are off the board, we're going to see teams circle back around to similar players here. It's fascinating because I don't know what Montreal is going to do. Last year after the draft, we knew that they were linked to Chris Weidman and Cedrick Paquette and David Savard, and we kind of knew what their free agency was going to look like. We don't know what their free agency is going to look like this year. And that's exciting to me.
I think it's fun. It's super, for the first time in quite some time, we're not approaching it with dread. We're approaching it with question marks and excitement.
To be fair, the last time we really approached it with dread, not counting last year, the year before that, they ended up with Tyler Toffoli for 4 years, which was great because they lost out on Taylor Hall. And I got really mad at Mark Bergevin on this podcast where I just pleaded with him to do literally anything. And he went, okay, and then signed Tyler Toffoli to one of the best value contracts in the NHL. But we don't know what they're going to do. We don't know if there's going to be trades. By the time you're listening to this on Monday, they may have done something already. So I trust Kent Hughes to make the right choice here. He's earning my trust as the GM currently, little by little. I know to not let myself be enamored with a small body of work. And let's see how everything goes here. We will have so much more this week. We're going to talk everything else, wrapping up the draft tomorrow. We are going to do our best to hook up with a guest for a live show Tuesday night. So your Wednesday episode will be a live show Tuesday night so they can answer all our draft questions and your draft questions. Fingers crossed on that. We have so much more coming this week. We will have a post free agency show as everything goes down. I will be doing live hits. If anything crazy happens, we have you covered. Do not worry. So make sure you are following at LO_Canadians on Twitter. You can follow Laura at The Active Stick. You can follow myself at Scott Matla. Subscribe on YouTube so you can see our shining faces as we talk about all things Montreal Canadiens. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.